To begin.
Recording.
To begin.
How
to start.
Right. This is Prelude to an Introduction, Part 2. That was A. This will be Part 2B.
Part 2B, subsection 5, paragraph L.
That's what I'm going to do, is start having to find weird ways to number tangents. And I've wanted to figure out a way to do my North by Northwest episodes this way. Mm-hmm. But I can't make extra episodes, so I just got to figure out how do I get as far away from the content of the minute as possible. And so it's just tangent, away and away.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, oh, that's who designed this house? Here's what else he designed. And he lived in this country. And I'm like, just go wherever it goes.
Yeah. Well, there's definitely a lot in terms of costumes and the suits and dresses that everyone's wearing.
Well, I got the minutes where he's doing the drunk driving thing. So I have 2 minutes in a row with no dialogue. I'm like, I could try some drunk driving and record it, but that might be dangerous. So I don't know.
Yeah. But you can't win. It's like, okay, so there's 2 minutes where there's no dialogue versus 3 minutes where it's just three guys sitting in a room.
Right. You also don't want that.
And it's not even, and it's just small talk.
Yeah.
It's not even compelling conversation.
No, you know what really bugged me?
Yeah.
It wasn't that I get 2 minutes with no dialogue. It's that it's 1959?
Mm-hmm.
I can't see what's in the room behind them. There's statues. And I'm like, I don't know what that statue is. It's too blurry. And I want to nitpick, when I did the later minutes in, Into the Night, I'm like, that's a Picasso painting right there. I'm going to look up that Picasso painting. This one, I'm like, I don't know what that painting is. It has a tree, I think. Even the alcohol brands, they're all blurry. So it took me forever to figure out what they were. But I'm like, fine, that's something I'll use. It's something.
Everything is something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Speaking of everything is something, welcome listeners to Tristram Shandy. No. See? This is why I need an intro. Welcome to Cock and Bull Minute, a Tristram Shandy story, in which we look at the film Tristram Shandy, a Cock and Bull story, 1 minute at a time. Or we will. Eventually. Right now we're talking about other podcasts we do or don't do. And that's actually what I wanted to ask you next. Well, actually, no, before I get to that. The next scene. I have a concept for you. What about a deleted scene?
Ooh. Okay.
Because my videos on YouTube, I have a few. My most viewed videos are not things I made, which sucks. They're just random things I put up, clips from American Dad or a few of my most viewed.
Mm-hmm.
But my most viewed right now is a deleted scene from a movie you covered in Movies by Minutes format, Groundhog Day. It is the pool hustler scene.
The pool playing, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And that scene has this whole different context for me now because I see it often because I still get notifications whenever people comment, and people comment often. And I go in and I respond to them. I talk to people. A few people have been directed to my blog from comments there. But it's this thing where now that scene, I look at it in a whole different way than when I looked at it the first time, because just that one scene of him playing pool and knowing all this stuff, I can interpret. How long has he been in the loop? Is this early in the time loop when he's doing this for the money? Or is this when he's depressed? And that's why he purposely overplays his hand at the betting so that they won't take him up on it.
Mm-hmm.
Or is this later in the movie when he's knows everything about everything in town? And it's interpreting, where does this scene go if you put it in there? And then it gets me because I've read 4 of the 5 drafts of the script. And I'm like, where does it fit in that one and this one? And how does it fit in the movie? And it's a scene that's not even in the movie, like the one you were talking about last episode.
Mm-hmm.
But then I also want to talk about YouTube comments because, oh my God, they are awful. There are people that, okay, it's a deleted scene. It's worth commenting whether or not you think it goes in the movie. Fine. Whether or not you think it's good. Fine. But you don't have to be a dick about it. And you don't have to get into a know-it-all discussion about what you think of pool hustling in general, or what hustling means, or what teams he said, even though it's pretty clear. And I've argued with people in there. I've gotten to very philosophical conversations with people in there, all because of this one little scene of a movie that I've watched many, many times, but haven't seen in a while right now, because not since February. It's a concept. Anyway, but what I wanted to ask you was what movies You're doing next scene now, which is different. Would you do another movies by minutes?
Yes, I would. And part of my motivation in doing the next scene is I couldn't pick just one movie to say I'm going to do 100 episodes. I'm going to spend 50 hours or 75 hours just talking about one movie, which I would love to do, but you got to pick. Whereas if I do, and I think the show's going to be bi-weekly. So this way I get to talk about a different movie every 2 weeks.
Now, do you mean bi-weekly? You mean bi-weekly as in every 2 weeks or twice a week?
I mean, every 2 weeks.
Okay. That's one of those weird words. That
fortnightly, I should say.
Yeah, let's bring that back. So bi-weekly doesn't get confusing.
We're bringing back fortnight. Yeah. So fortnightly, so I can talk about a different movie every 2 weeks, because there are great and some not so great movies that absolutely deserve to be talked about.
And sometimes in terms of specific scenes, there are great scenes in movies that otherwise aren't very good, or great movies that have awful scenes. So depends on what grabs your attention. It's a nice format. I like it. That's why I made Mandalorian Time Machine, and then I neglected it for other shows, because movies by minutes fit my obsessiveness.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I want to do more of them. Like, I watch a movie and I'm like, I could talk about this minute. I can talk about it a lot. Right. And then like, and this one. And then something will happen I don't like. I'm like, someone else should do this show and have me as a guest. But then I have a list of movies I want to do, and at least one that I intend to do. And I even already have like a Twitter for it, and I think I have a Facebook group for it, which is Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. But I think you've said before you did Spinal Tap first because Groundhog Day was like the one you really wanted to do.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so when I first found out about this format, or that format, the movies by minutes, and it was my brother,
it's this format,
course, who said, hey, there's, Star Wars Minute. Shout out to Pete and Alex. There's these guys that are talking about the Star Wars movies 1 minute at a time. And I'm like, wow, that sounds strange. But I listened to it and I thought, great. And my immediate thought went to Groundhog Day.
Yeah.
Is as a movie that I've gone back to. And we relate to, my brother and I, we kind of relate to each other through movies. It's kind of the first thing. We live a few states apart. But when we talk or when we see each other, it's always, what movies are you seeing? What have you, what new movies have you seen? What old movies have you rewatched? And
nice.
We just talk about movies, and we'd always come back, or I would always steer the conversation back to Groundhog Day. So it was naturally the first thing I thought of is, if I'm going to do a podcast, I'm going to cover the movie Groundhog Day 1 minute at a time. And I wanted to do it well, or as well as I could.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I should do something else first, because that's how you get good at things. You practice.
Yeah.
You do, and then you get good. So I'm like, okay, let me do something else. And it was weird. I forget why. Like, I'm not very active on Twitter and at all. And I wasn't then. Something made me, but I have a Twitter account, and like every 3 months or 2 months, a couple times a year, I'll go up on Twitter and just kind of flip through, and the handful of accounts that I follow, I'll just see if there's anything interesting. And it's usually, there's so much, because I'm so far behind, because it's been months since I've checked.
Yeah.
But one of the accounts that I followed was the Star Wars Minute guys on Twitter. And I happened to be going through their stuff one day, and I saw they had retweeted a message from someone saying, hey, I'm looking to do a Movies by Minute podcast, and I need a co-host. And I'm like, oh, I'm looking to do, well, it's funny because I'm thinking, I know nothing.
Yeah.
As far as, I don't know the technical side of podcasting. I haven't produced and edited. I know nothing about talking on a podcast. I hadn't been a guest even at that point. If I can find someone who has some experience that I can leverage, I can learn from them. And the message was from Heidi Bennett. She was looking to do This Is Spinal Tap 1 minute at a time. And so I responded saying, hey, if you're looking for a co-host, I will be your co-host. And it turns out she had the same thought process that I had, that she had zero podcasting experience and was hoping to find a co-host who had done it before to kind of help her out. So it turned out neither of us had any idea what we were doing.
Yeah.
Which is Which
It's a
is
great way
usually
to jump in.
a good way to start a new project, because half the things that get done, if people knew what they were doing, they never would have done it. They would have said, this is a horrible, bad idea. No one should do this ever. So we leveraged our collective ignorance. And we covered the movie This is Spinal Tap 1 minute at a time, which I think is still, if you consider it a musical, and there's a handful of musical numbers, and I think it's a short movie. I think it's something like 83 minutes, including credits. And something like 10 of those minutes were nothing but music.
Huh.
And then I think there's probably another 10 that are like the beginning of a performance or the end of a song. But I'm talking 1 minute where there's nothing but a performance going on, nothing but music being played and showing the titular band Spinal Tap on stage. So I would consider it a musical, and I think it's the only musical. It was certainly the first Movies by Minutes done on a musical, and the first Movies by Minutes podcast done on a documentary. So we've got that going for us. So
we got that going for me, which is nice.
Yeah. So we did that. We did 1 minute at a time. This is Spinal Tap, and then I thought, okay, now I'm not an expert. I'm not a professional. No one's paying me to do it, but I know what I'm doing enough that I felt I was ready to take on Groundhog Day.
Yeah.
And so I did.
And when you're the one who introduced me to that, to be on Groundhog Minute.
Yeah. So that's how we met, because I'm researching the movie Groundhog Day, and there's some guy who has a blog called the Groundhog Day Project, where he watched Groundhog Day, the entire film, every day for a year, and then wrote about it on his blog. He wrote about the movie and different characters and the actors and the scenery and many, many tangents going off from there. And I said, you know what? If I'm going to talk about the movie Groundhog Day, this is a guy I should have as a guest. This is a guy who knows this film. And also I had reached out to the writer,
Danny Rubin,
yeah, of Groundhog Day, and said, hey, would you be a guest? Would you talk to us about your film? And at that point, he had just wrapped up. There was a Groundhog Day musical,
yes,
which did not last long on Broadway, but it was on Broadway.
Yeah,
and I guess
we should go on tour.
Yeah, so he had been through the process of getting the musical made, and then doing publicity and everything, and interviews for the show. And so at that point he said, you know what, I'm kind of Groundhog Day out. Thank you, but no thank you. He was very kind.
Yeah, he's nice.
But then he said, you know what, there's this guy who watched the movie every day for a year. You should talk to him.
Yeah, because I met him in Woodstock.
Yeah, and I said, you know what, funnily enough, yeah, I have talked to that guy. And that guy was you. That guy was Robert Black.
But yeah, because if it hadn't been like you doing Groundhog Minute that got me to this, whenever I eventually learned of this format, Groundhog Day would have been the movie I would have had to go to because of my blog.
Mm-hmm.
As it was, my impulse movie was one I'm doing now by myself, Annihilation. But that wasn't because it's like one of my favorite movies necessarily. It was because I had just seen it and was like really moved by it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was recent. But also there's a lot of backstory in that, a lot of places you can go with the novel it's based on and novels that it steals from and all this other stuff, which I'm putting in that show. And I'm like, that's a lot of preparation. I can't do this. So I went with something else first.
Yeah.
I went with a movie that was really familiar and that I've been watching since I was a little kid. I went with the original Halloween and did Michael Myers Minute. So yeah, I get that. Yeah, you start with one thing and figure out what you're doing, or hope you figure out what you're doing. I figure if some people are listening, I'm doing something worth doing, so it's fine. People ask how many people listen to my show. I'm like, I don't know. I don't check.
Yeah.
I don't want to know. If it's really low, I'll be disappointed. And if it's really high, I'll be maybe like overwhelmed. I don't know. Right.
Would you feel like, oh, and I got to do even more. I need to
shit,
be
there's
more
pressure now. I have to be good.
Spend more on a microphone.
Right. But I'll just be me and do whatever. But yeah, then I have a list of like ones I want to do. I already have social media stuff for Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Minute to do that one. And if I wasn't doing this one right now, it would have been the next thing I started. I think I'm going to put that one off until I'm done with the Room Minute because I want it to be one that I can really focus on. This is more do what comes up, and this is only going up once a week. Annihilation Minute is only once a week.
Mm-hmm.
Mandy Sucks was every day of the week for a while, and now that's behind me. Except for a bonus episode, which I need to edit. Which should be up by the time you hear this, listeners, if you want listen to that show also. There's a bonus episode you could go listen to.
So is there a movie... Well, I was going to say, is there a movie that scares you, but I don't know if that's the best way to say. Is there a movie that you would like to do, or that you would do if you thought you were able to do it justice, but you don't think you're the best person, and maybe you're hoping someone else does it so you can listen?
I have a different category than that, but as far as that one goes, it's interesting.
Yeah.
I know there's movies I could be a good guest on, because like I was thinking just yesterday or day before about like movies. The last year Groundhog Day Project wrote about movies that I watched all the time as a kid. Mm-hmm. And it was like things I'm really familiar with. Someone already did Flash Gordon, you know?
Yeah.
But it was great to be a guest on Flash Gordon.
Yes.
Because of that. It was a movie I watched all the time. And there's movies I watched all the time that wouldn't be worth doing in this format. Mr. Mom would not benefit from this format. You could probably do a day-by-day thing for it if you wanted to, because it has a specific timeline for it, I think.
Okay, maybe day by day.
But, like, Halloween is that kind of movie where I'm familiar enough with it I could do it. Mm-hmm. Something that I'd want someone else to do instead, I don't know, it'd probably be something that's already being done, like Mad Max or something like that. Like, The Road Warrior is one of my favorite movies ever, and I don't think I'd want to do it.
Yeah, and especially listening to, some of my favorite movies I kind of grew up on. Road Warrior and Beyond Thunderdome were kind of my jam back in the day. But, listening to what Rick and Julie are doing, I'm like, I could not have done better than they are.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But as a different category, I have like movies that I think would be insane to do. I'd love to do them, but no one would listen. That's my category. Because I like, my favorite movies often are weird things. Like one of my favorite movies, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, people have seen. Mm-hmm. Most of my students haven't, because they're like college age, high school age, but older people, like your age, my age, we're close to the same age, have seen that or know what it is. But one of my favorite movies in the last few years was, I think it's a Polish film called Never Look Away. It was out just like a year and a half ago. Mm-hmm. And I would love to cover that movie. Especially because there is I think it is a 24 minute segment with no dialogue. And I would love to see what comes of that. It's just those minutes are this artist trying to figure out what is his style of art, because he's been like aping other people's and he's trying to figure out what is it that he's going to put into art. And it's got great music and great cinematography, and it's this like climax of the film has no dialogue. And I'm like, oh, I would love the challenge of that. Or if you've seen or know of the film Tim's Vermeer.
Yes. Yeah.
I would love to approach that movie in this format. But then it's like, given the subject matter of that movie, listeners, if you don't know it, it is a guy who tries to painstakingly reproduce a Vermeer painting in this very tedious, slow process that basically creates like photo quality detail in a painting and reproduction. It took him years, I forget how long, to reproduce this one painting. And so I'm like, how do I make a movies by minute show out of that without getting even more obsessive in some way? I wouldn't want to reproduce the painting because that's not the audio version. Mm-hmm. But it's like, maybe I'm reproducing the movie audio-wise or something. I don't know. And I'm like, I couldn't do that. I don't think anyone should, but I want to.
Yeah.
And like weird movies like Birdman, I think would be amazing in this format. But it's one that maybe I'd rather someone else did. Maybe come back to your question, because then I don't have to worry about it.
Right. Yeah, that's one that's also on my list. Given, infinite time to do infinite podcasts, I'd eventually would do it, but silently hoping someone else does it first, so that I wouldn't have to.
Well, it's like when someone put up, I think it's German-speaking podcasts are doing it before sunrise.
Yeah.
And I'm like, thank you. Now I can take those off my list.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're going to do all three of them, but I can put that aside. I don't need to do it.
Yeah.
Or maybe I will. I don't know. They're doing it in German.
Yeah.
I won't know if it's good or not.
Yeah.
I don't speak German.
Something that's been up on moviesbyminutes.com for a while, it with coming soon, is The Wizard of Oz. 1 minute at a time.
That's one, now that you mention it, I'm surprised no one had done yet. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's
someone has a claim
one
to
of those that, one of my favorites, something I've seen the Judy Garland version of Wizard of Oz, which is, a great movie, absolutely deserves to be done, that I'm like, I don't know if I'm the best person, but we'll see. Cause it's been up there as coming soon, I think over a year at this point. So we'll see if it actually happens. The first one that comes to mind in that category for me is Singing in the Rain,
nice.
which is a movie. It's in terms of, could I sit down and talk about Singing in the Rain 1 minute at a time with very little preparation? I've seen it hundreds of times, so I probably could, but I think I don't know. I don't have the knowledge of early Hollywood, of the time period that's portrayed in the film. I think someone, to really do that film justice, you have to have a deep knowledge of the thing that it's portraying and in a lot of times parodying.
Or time to take up a deep interest.
Yeah.
In it.
Or the time to research it and know those things. And I don't know if I have that knowledge, and I certainly don't have the time. I don't think I have the time to gain that knowledge, but I'm hoping someone, who has that knowledge will have it, and I can listen and maybe be a guest if I'm lucky.
I did do 7 days of that for my blog, so I did write about that one, but I don't know if I'd want to do that one minute by minute either.
Yeah.
I'd want to guest on it if someone did.
Yeah. I mean, it's certainly, there's enough there. Like it certainly can support that level of scrutiny.
Especially if you get into the Hollywood history of like the sound stuff and all. Yeah.
Yeah. The transition from silent to talkies, and from black and white and color. And then the style of Hollywood media. So many of the songs in that movie were in other movies first, which when I learned that, I'm like, that's weird to me. It's not like how a musical would be now, where it's like you don't make a bunch of musicals and then decide which songs you like and make a new one. And that was kind of how they made movies then, because I don't know. Yeah, they would take a hit song and say, well, let's make a movie around this, a song that's already a hit.
Right, which was a hit from a movie.
Yeah.
And they make a new movie about that song. And I'm like, okay, it's weird and cool. Just before we finish up this episode, I mentioned it earlier, the long title I have for one of my potential ones. This would be assuming that A, I got famous off of podcasting and have a following enough to be pretentious like this, or B, that I don't care. Because it is the examination of the assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford by the podcaster Robert Black. It's a little wordy, but I like it.
I love it. That's a great title.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then it's a long Western that most people haven't seen and probably wouldn't want to. But I love it, and so.
Yeah. But that's something I would listen to that podcast just based on the title. And again, I haven't seen the movie. I don't think I need to see the movie, but I need to listen to the podcast.
Yeah. Speaking of listening to podcasts, what podcast can people listen to hear you?
You can hear me on Spinal Tap Minute at spinaltapminute.com. You can hear me on Groundhog Minute at groundhogminute.com. And you can hear me on The Next Scene at nextscenepod.com.
You got .coms for all of them?
I do.
You just made a .com money?
I was, but I spent it all on all those .coms.
I got 2 .coms. I got lemmingdrops.com, where you get links to everything else. And then I got groundhogdayproject.com, because that felt big enough that it needed one.
Yeah.
Podcasts, I'm like, I can't do one for each. I have, how many podcasts I have currently?
You have a lot.
Currently, I have
5?
4 and 2.5, I'd say.
5.
Because there's still a bonus episode coming up on Mandy Sucks, and I do intend to go do Halloween 2 minutes at a time sometime next year, I hope.
Oh, good.
And continue that, but then I got to continue past that because one of the rules, keep going.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so listeners, if you need, since there's no outro, lemmingdrops.com to find links to my podcasts, my really poor sound quality YouTube movie reviews from about 6 years ago, whenever that was, and Groundhog Day Project, the blog we were talking about. This has been Cock and Bull Minute, Tristram Shandy's story.
That's all, folks.